What are some of the pros of lifting like this? Again, we're talking about the average person here, okay? Lifting like this really does a great job of building overall muscle. You're going to build more general overall muscle in your body because of the sheer tension that's involved when you're moving maximal weight. So,
it's not just that. It's something that you said, and I used to repeat it all the time after you said it because it was like the first time I'd ever heard anybody say it this way, and I haven't repeated it in a long time. Is when you used to give the amplifier analogy to the speakers.
Yeah.
I love that analogy, and I never thought about powerlifting and training like, where you're trying to really fire the CNS and basically I'm investing in building my central nervous system. It's efficiency.
Turning up that amplitude.
And anybody who understands how speakers work knows that you can have the most expensive, baddest, hugest subwoofers in the world, but if you have some cheap ass, 200 watt amplifier, you ain't gonna get shit out of those speakers. And in fact, most people that really understand stereo system would argue that the amplifier and tuner is the most valuable part of the speaker system. And so I that's why I love that analogy you gave on time, because I think like when you get into training like a power lifter, you are really learning how to build an efficient central nervous system. And that's what I felt I got out of training this way was I now learned how to call upon my muscles like I never have before, because I had never put a lot of effort towards the amplifier. I'd always put this effort towards the speakers.
Yes.
Right. And you get so much more effective and efficient at energy management. So when you're moving around, you are able to apply that instant, the maximum amount of force that you need, but no more.
Yep.
Right. And you're able to relax your body and move fluidly. So it definitely applies to athletics as well as it does powerlifting. So, I mean, that's just something that will apply to a lot more real world situations too, because you have to organize your entire body a lot of times to lift something off the ground, to put something overhead. So a lot more real world kind of functional strength.
So people are like, well, what do you mean by functional strength? I've heard people say that. It's all functional. Okay, technically that's true. However, in the real world, when you're moving couches and boxes and your TV and whatever, you're not trying to make those things feel heavier. You want to make them feel lighter. Right. So this kind of training, it lends itself better to real world applicable strength. If I take two lifters who are getting, who only have maybe 6 months of lifting experience, and one person I teach them just to feel the muscle and squeeze the muscle with every single lift, and the other one I'm like, let's maximize your exercise efficiency and really learn how to lift as much weight as possible. The person lifting most weight is going to build the most total muscle. It's just a fact. It just does that. So it's this isn't as much of a big muscle builder, which is probably why, Adam, you said the bodybuilders in the beginning would benefit a lot from powerlifting style training, because they would just gain new muscle from training in this particular way.
Yeah, I also think that it's kind of compounding, right? If you get to, for example, like if I've never squatted over 225 trying to focus on, let's say, building my glutes, because I trained always like a bodybuilder and I never went through a powerlifting phase that pushed me over 400, I could never go back and do 315 and control and focus on my squats.
Good point.
You understand what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
If you always train with weight doesn't matter, like I did for so long, you never really push those boundaries to new limits on your body. I'm always floating around, let's say, with the 225 squat, and just slowing the tempo down.
Good point.
And so what it opened for me was, and I know I use squats and glutes, which was not really a focus of mine. It probably would have been better for me was my back analogy, right? Like, it really opened up the amount of mass that I could build on my back, because I had never pushed weights like 400 or 500 pounds in a deadlift. So all of a sudden now I could, it took me forever, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but for making my point, let's say I was rowing like on a seated row where I could really activate my lats and think about the muscles, with 150, let's say. I would say that was like a heavy weight, but light enough that I could really control rolling the shoulders, feeling in my lats. And that was probably at my peak strength. After I stopped rowing, did nothing but deadlifting, got really strong, I got up to 550 pounds deadlifting. Then I come back, I could do that same controlled rowing with like 225
Yeah.
pounds. And so it now allows me to train like a bodybuilder, connecting to these muscles with a higher stress than I ever could before. And it opened that for me, where I don't think that bodybuilding would have done the same
Good
for the
point.
powerlifter.
Yeah, I mean, it's that systemic effect, right, versus sort of a localized approach, and there's a lot of muscle groups and stabilizer type muscles that you probably aren't stressing enough doing, a more bodybuilder style training. Whereas like everything it gets affected because it's all up the kinetic chain. You have to ground yourself. You have to brace your spine. Like there's just more demand going in that direction, which you do get sort of that carryover of more muscle mass as a result.
I definitely think it's that, and I think a big portion of it is going back to the amplifier analogy.
Yeah.
I upgraded my amplifier like I never have before. I've had
Your
I
capacity
built the
is
big,
increased.
12-inch or whatever subwoofers forever that were top of the line, that were awesome because I put years and years and years into making those, but I had been running off the same amp for forever. And for the first time in my life, I upgraded my amp, and I didn't just kind of upgrade it. I upgraded it to a whole nother level. And now that amp could blow those speakers out the water. Now it gives me the opportunity to go build 18-inch subwoofers or 20-inch
That's a
subwoofers.
very good point.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's what's so amazing about that. So I think a lot of that goes back to the CNS more. If I had to attribute what I think it was the probably the most value.
I would
from that.
agree. And lastly, the strength that you build training this way is just less applicable to the real world because, as I said earlier, in the real world, the last thing you want to do when you're using strength, when you have to use strength, is make something
Make it harder than it should
light
be.
feel heavy. You don't want to make light things feel heavy in the real world, because in the real world, I'm not trying to develop my biceps and my rear delts and my rhomboids and my traps when I'm moving a table or a couch or doing something that requires some strength. I'm trying to do the opposite. But if I always train my body to feel heavy, lightweight, feel heavy, then when I go try to move heavy things in the real world, I don't have the skill. I don't have the skill to do so. And this is where sometimes bodybuilders get a bad rap, where bodybuilders will go and they'll go do something physical or whatever, and people will be like, my God, that guy's 250 pounds and he's not that, he looks like he's way stronger than he really is. Really what it is they got the muscle, they just don't have the ability, they don't have the skill of doing what we're kind of talking about. So if you want to build applicable strength, then the other style of training is going to give you more of that than this. But I think the big point to make is this, is if you plan on making strength training something that you do for a long period of time, or hopefully for the rest of your life, both of these are equally important. Both of them have pros and cons. And again, the key is to maximize the pros, minimize the cons. In plain speak, what does that look like? Well, it looks like phasing in and phasing out of each one of these styles of training. 3 to 6 weeks in one, 3 to 6 weeks in another one. And what do you get with that? More consistent progress, less injury, and a better looking physique.